MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20. Number. Analysis. Long ago, an old man built a grand temple at the center of his village. People traveled to worship at the temple. So the old man made arrangements for food and accommodation inside the temple itself. He needed someone who could look after the temple, so he put up a notice, "Manager needed." Seeing the notice, many people went to the old man. But he returned all the applicants after interviews, telling them, "I need a qualified person for this work." The old man would sit on the roof of his house every morning, watching people go through the temple doors. One day, he saw a young man come to the temple. When that young man left the temple, the old man called him and asked, "Will you take care of this temple?" The young man was surprised by the offer and replied, "I have no experience caring for a temple. I'm not even educated." The old man smiled and said, "I don't want any educated man. I want a qualified person." Confused, the young man asked, "But why do you consider me a qualified person?" The old man replied, "I buried a brick on the path to the temple. I watched for many days as people tripped over that brick. No one thought to remove it. But you dug up that brick." The young man said, "I haven't done anything great. It's the duty of every human being to think about others. I only did my duty." The old man smiled and said, "Only people who know their duty and perform it are qualified people." MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20. Number. 0103. A nurse took a tired, anxious soldier to the bedside. "Jack, your son is here," the nurse said to an old man lying on the bed. "Jack, ... She had to repeat the words several times before the old man's eyes opened. Suffering from the severe pain because of heart disease, he barely saw the young uniformed soldier standing next to him. He reached out his hand to the soldier. The soldier gently wrapped his fingers around the weak hand of the old man. The nurse brought a chair so that the soldier could sit beside the bed. All through the night the young soldier sat there, holding the old man's hand and offering him words of support and comfort. Occasionally, she suggested that the soldier take a rest for a while. He politely said no. Whenever the nurse came into the room, she heard the soldier say a few gentle words. The old man said nothing, only held tightly to him all through the night. Just before dawn, the old man died. The soldier released the old man's hand and left the room to find the nurse. After she was told what happened, she went back to the room with him. The soldier hesitated for a while and asked, "Who was this man?" She was surprised and asked, "Wasn't he your father?" "No, he wasn't. I've never met him before," the soldier replied. She asked, "Then why didn't you say something when I took you to him?" He said, "I knew there had been a mistake, but when I realized that he was too sick to tell whether or not I was his son, I could see how much he needed me. So, I stayed." MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20. Number. 0406. Once upon a time, there was a king who lived in a beautiful palace. While the king was away, a monster approached the gates of the palace. The monster was so ugly and smelly that the guards froze in shock. He passed the guards and sat on the king's throne. The guards soon came to their senses, went in, and shouted at the monster, demanding that he get off the throne. With each bad word the guards used, the monster grew more ugly and smelly. The guards got even angrier. They began to brandish their swords to scare the monster away from the palace. But he just grew bigger and bigger, eventually taking up the whole room. He grew more ugly and smelly than ever. Eventually the king returned. He was wise and kind and saw what was happening. He knew what to do. He smiled and said to the monster, welcome to my palace." He asked the monster if he wanted a cup of coffee. The monster began to grow smaller as he drank the coffee. The king offered him some takeout pizza and fries. The guards immediately called for pizza. The monster continued to get smaller with the king's kind gestures. He then offered the monster a full-body massage. As the guards helped with the relaxing massage, the monster became tiny. With another act of kindness to the monster, he just disappeared. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20 Number 0709. On my daughter Marie's 8th birthday, she received a bunch of presents from her friends at school. Marie ate. That evening, with her favorite present, a teddy bear, in her arms, we went to a restaurant to celebrate her birthday. Our server, a friendly woman, noticed my daughter holding the teddy bear and said, "My daughter loves teddy bears, too." Then, we started chatting about her family. The server mentioned during the conversation that her daughter was in the hospital with a broken leg. She also said that Marie looked about the same age as her daughter. Marie. She was so kind and attentive all evening, and even gave Marie cookies for free. Marie. After we finished our meal, we paid the bill and began to walk to our car when unexpectedly Marie asked me to wait and ran back into the restaurant. Marie. When Marie came back out, I asked her what she had been doing. Marie. She said that she gave her teddy bear to our server so that she could give it to her daughter. I was surprised at her sudden action because I could see how much she loved that bear already. She must have seen the look on my face, because she said, "I can't imagine being stuck in a hospital bed. I just want her to get better soon." I felt moved by Marie's words as we walked toward the car. Then, our server ran out to our car and thanked Marie for her generosity. Marie. The server said that she had never had anyone doing anything like that for her family before. Later, Marie said it was her best birthday ever. Marie. I was so proud of her empathy and warmth, and this was an unforgettable experience for our family. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20 Number 1012. Once, a farmer lost his precious watch while working in his barn. It may have appeared to be an ordinary watch to others, but it brought a lot of happy childhood memories to him. It was one of the most important things to him. After searching for it for a long time, the old farmer became exhausted. However, the tired farmer did not want to give up on the search for his watch and asked a group of children playing outside to help him. He promised an attractive reward for the person who could find it. After hearing about the reward, the children hurried inside the barn and went through and round the entire pile of hay looking for the watch. After a long time searching for it, some of the children got tired and gave up. The number of children looking for the watch slowly decreased and only a few tired children were left. The farmer gave up all hope of finding it and called off the search. Just when the farmer was closing the barn door, a little boy came up to him and asked the farmer to give him another chance. The farmer did not want to lose out on any chance of finding the watch, so let him in the barn. After a little while the boy came out with the farmer's watch in his hand. He was happily surprised and asked how he had succeeded to find the watch while everyone else had failed. He replied, "I just sat there and tried listening for the sound of the watch. In silence, it was much easier to hear it and follow the direction of the sound." He was delighted to get his watch back and rewarded the little boy as promised. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20 Number 1315. One day a young man was walking along a road on his journey from one village to another. As he walked he noticed a monk working in the fields. The young man turned to the monk and said, "Excuse me. Do you mind if I ask you a question?" "Not at all," replied the monk. I am traveling from the village in the mountains to the village in the valley, and I was wondering if you knew what it is like in the village in the valley. Tell me, said the monk, what was your experience of the village in the mountains? Terrible, replied the young man. I am glad to be away from there. I found the people most unwelcoming. So tell me, what can I expect in the village in the valley? I am sorry to tell you, said the monk, but I think your experience will be much the same there. The young man lowered his head helplessly and walked on. A while later a middle-aged man journeyed down the same road and came upon the monk. I am going to the village in the valley, said the man. Do you know what it is like? I do, replied the monk, but first tell me about the village where you came from. I've come from the village in the mountains, said the man. It was a wonderful experience. I felt as though I was a member of the family in the village. Why did you feel like that? Asked the monk. The elders gave me much advice, and people were kind and generous. I am sad to have left there. And what is the village in the valley like? He asked again. I think you will find it much the same, replied the monk. I'm glad to hear that, the middle-aged man said, smiling, and journeyed on. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20, Number 1618. One day a poor man brought a bunch of grapes to a prince as a gift. He was very excited to be able to bring a gift for him because he was too poor to afford more. The prince. He placed the grapes beside the prince and said, "Oh, prince, please accept this small gift from me." His face beamed with happiness as he offered his small gift. The prince thanked him politely. As the man looked at him expectantly, the prince ate one grape. Then he ate another one. The prince. Slowly the prince finished the whole bunch of grapes by himself. He did not offer grapes to anyone near him. The man who brought those grapes to him was very pleased and left. The prince. The close friends of the prince who were around him were very surprised. Usually the prince shared whatever he had with others. He would offer them whatever he was given and they would eat it together. This time was different. Without offering it to anyone, he finished the bunch of grapes by himself. The prince. One of the friends asked, "Prince, how come you ate all the grapes by yourself and did not offer them to any one of us?" He smiled and said that he ate all the grapes by himself because the grapes were too sour. If the prince had offered the grapes to them, they might have made funny faces and shown their distaste for the grapes. That would have hurt the feelings of that poor man. He thought to himself that it would be better to eat all of them cheerfully and please him. That poor man. He did not want to hurt the feelings of that poor man. Everyone around him was moved by his thoughtfulness. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20, Number 1921. A rich merchant lived alone in his house. Knowing that he was the only person living in the house, he was always prepared in case thieves came to his house. So, one day, when a thief entered his home, he remained calm and cool. Although he was awake, the merchant pretended to be in a deep sleep. He lay in bed and watched the thief in action. The thief had brought a new white sheet with him to carry away the stolen goods. He spread it out on the floor with the idea of putting all the stolen valuables into it, tying it, and carrying it away. While he was busy gathering expensive-looking items from the merchant's luxurious house, the merchant quickly got out of the bed. Then he replaced the new white sheet with a similar-looking white sheet, which was much weaker and much cheaper than the thief's one. He then lay down and pretended to be asleep. When the thief had finished collecting as many valuables as he could, he hurriedly tied a knot in the white sheet which he thought was his. The merchant meanwhile ran out into the garden and yelled, "Thief! Thief!" with all the air in his lungs. The thief got nervous and quickly lifted the sheet. To his surprise, the thin white sheet, filled with stolen goods, was torn apart. All the stolen goods fell down on the floor, creating a very loud and unpleasant noise. Seeing many people run towards him, the thief had to give up on all of the stolen goods. Leaving the goods behind in the house, he ran away in a hurry, saying under his breath, "This man is such a skillful merchant, he is a businessman to the core. He has not only managed to save his valuables but has also taken away my new sheet. He has stolen from a thief." As he said that to himself, he ran away from the house. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20, Number 2224. When I was 17, I discovered a wonderful thing. 17. My father and I were sitting on the floor of his study. We were organizing his old papers. Across the carpet I saw a fat paper clip. Its rust dusted the cover sheet of a report of some kind. I picked it up. I started to read. Then I started to cry. It was a speech he had written in 1920, in Tennessee. 1920 Tennessee. Then only 17 himself and graduating from high school, he had called for equality for African Americans. 17. I marveled, proud of him, and wondered how, in 1920, so young, so white, and in the deep South, where the law still separated black from white, he had had the courage to deliver it. 1920. I asked him about it. "Daddy," I said, handing him the pages, "this speech, how did you ever get permission to give it? And weren't you scared?" "Well, honey," he said, "I didn't ask for permission. I just asked myself, what is the most important challenge facing my generation? I knew immediately. Then I asked myself, and if I weren't afraid, what would I say about it in this speech? I wrote it. And I delivered it." About halfway through I looked out to see the entire audience of teachers, students, and parents stand up and walk out. Left alone on the stage, I thought to myself, well, I guess I need to be sure to do only two things with my life: keep thinking for myself, and not get killed. He handed the speech back to me, and smiled. "You seem to have done both," I said. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20, Number 2527. Once upon a time, there lived a young king who had a great passion for hunting. His kingdom was located at the foot of the Himalayas. Once every year, he would go hunting in the nearby forests. He would make all the necessary preparations, and then set out for his hunting trip. Like all other years, the hunting season had arrived. Preparations began in the palace and the king got ready for his hunting trip. Deep in the forest, he spotted a beautiful wild deer. It was a large stag. His aim was perfect. When he killed the deer with just one shot of his arrow, the king was filled with pride. The proud hunter ordered a hunting drum to be made out of the skin of the deer. Seasons changed. A year passed by. 1. And it was time to go hunting once again. The king went to the same forest as the previous year. He used his beautiful deerskin drum to round up animals. But none came. All the animals ran for safety, except one doe. She came closer and closer to the drummer. Suddenly, she started fearlessly licking the deerskin drum. The king was surprised by this sight. An old servant had an answer to this strange behavior. "The deerskin used to make this drum belonged to her mate, the deer who we hunted last year. This doe is mourning the death of her mate," the man said. Upon hearing this, the king had a change of heart. He had never realized that an animal, too, felt the pain of loss. He made a promise, from that day on, to never again hunt wild animals. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20, Number 2830. James Walker was a renowned wrestler and he made his living through wrestling. James Walker. In his town, there was a tradition in which the leader of the town chose a day when James demonstrated his skills. James. The leader announced one day that James would exhibit his skills as a wrestler and asked the people if there was anyone to challenge him for the prize money. James, James. Everyone was looking around in the crowd when an old man stood up and said with a shaking voice, "I will enter the contest against him." James. Everyone burst out laughing thinking that it was a joke. James would crush him in a minute. James. According to the law, the leader could not stop someone who of his own free will entered the competition, so he allowed the old man to challenge the wrestler. When James saw the old man, he was speechless. James. Like everyone else, he thought that the old man had a death wish. The old man asked James to come closer since he wanted to say something to him. James. James moved closer and the old man whispered, "I know it is impossible for me to win, but my children are starving at home. James. Can you lose this competition to me so I can feed them with the prize money?" James thought he had an excellent opportunity to help a man in distress. James. He did a couple of moves so that no one would suspect that the competition was fixed. James. However, he did not use his full strength and allowed the old man to win. The old man was overjoyed when he received the prize money. That night James felt the most victorious he had ever felt. James. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20 Number 3133. A merchant in a small town had identical twin sons. The boys worked for their father in the store he owned, and when he died, they took over the store. Everything went well until the day a $20 bill disappeared. 20. One of the brothers had left the bill on the counter and walked outside with a friend. When he returned, the money was gone. He asked his older brother, "Did you see that $20 bill on the counter?" 20. His older brother replied that he had not. But the young man kept questioning him. $20 bills just don't get up and walk away. 20. Surely you must have seen it. There was subtle accusation in his voice. Anger began to rise. Hatred set in. Before long, bitterness divided the twins. They refused to speak. They finally decided they could no longer work together, and a dividing wall was built down the center of the store. For 20 years the hostility grew, spreading to their families and the community. 20. Then one day a man from another state stopped by the store. He walked in and asked the younger brother, "How long have you been here?" He replied that he'd been there all his life. The customer said, 20 years ago I came into this town in a boxcar. 20. I hadn't eaten for 3 days. 3. I came into this store and saw a $20 bill on the counter. 20. I put it in my pocket and walked out. All these years I haven't been able to forgive myself. So I had to come back to return it. The customer was amazed to see tears well up in the eyes of the man. Would you please go next door and tell that same story to the man in the store? The younger brother said. Then the customer was even more amazed to see the two middle-aged men hugging each other and weeping together in the front of the store. After 20 years, the brokenness was repaired. 20. The wall of anger that divided them came down. MTC. Good job. MTC. Let's start. 241, Chapter 20 Number 3436. Grandma, asked Amy, "Are angels real?" Amy. Some people say so, said grandmother. Amy told grandmother that she had seen them in pictures. Amy. But she also wanted to know if her grandmother had ever actually seen an angel. Her grandmother said she had, but they looked different than in pictures. Then, I am going to find one, said Amy. Amy. That's good. But I will go with you, because you're too little, said grandmother. Amy complained, but you walk so slowly. Amy. I can walk faster than you think. Grandmother replied, with a smile. So they started, Amy leaping and running. Amy. Then, she saw a horse coming towards them. On the horse sat a wonderful lady. When Amy saw her, the woman sparkled with jewels and gold, and her eyes were brighter than diamonds. Amy. Are you an angel? Asked Amy. Amy. The lady gave no reply, but stared coldly at her, leaving without saying a word. That was not an angel, said Amy. Amy. No, indeed, said grandmother. So Amy walked ahead again. Amy. Then, she met a beautiful woman who wore a dress as white as snow. You must be an angel, cried Amy. Amy. You dear little girl, do I really look like an angel? She asked. You are an angel, replied Amy. Amy. But suddenly the woman's face changed when Amy stepped on her dress by mistake. Amy. Go away, and go back to your home, she shouted. As Amy stepped back from the woman, she stumbled and fell. Amy. She lay in the dusty road and sobbed. I am tired. Will you take me home, Grandma? She asked. Sure. That is what I came for. Grandmother said in a warm voice. They started to walk along the road. Suddenly Amy looked up and said, Grandma, you are not an angel, are you? Oh, honey, said grandmother, I'm not an angel. Well, Grandma, you are an angel to me because you always stay by my side, said Amy. Amy. MTC. Good job.